Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Dukniak. I am the general manager of the Waukesha Water Utility. Have been at the Waukesha Water Utility since 2003, believe it or not. And am like I said, I'm the general manager and in charge of the operations at the Waukesha Water Utility. Just a few housekeeping items real quick before we go. There is if you notice, there's going to be videos of people that are talking. I'm going to turn my video off in a second just to make sure my bandwidth is okay. But if you want to hit the minimize button so you can see the entire PowerPoint presentation, that would be good. So you can minimize up in the corner. There should be a hide thumbnail video, or you can pin that closed. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we really appreciate you accommodating us with this online meeting. We understand that it's not the ideal situation, but due to safety during COVID, we felt it was the best for everyone involved. We did consult with a number of officials at the city and felt it was the best involved. Because we have a large audience here, we're all muted, so no one can talk. We're going to ask that you submit questions via the chat box, and at the end of the presentation we're going to have a live question and answer session. And what we're going to do at the end of that is, because there was a number of people that submitted, we are going to go through the questions that were submitted initially, and then we will go ahead and get everyone, or get those questions answered, and then see if there was any additional questions submitted via chat, and we will then answer those questions. We are recording tonight's meeting, so we will make it available via or on the greatwateralliance.com website. So we just want to make sure that if you cannot stay for the entire presentation, you will be able to see this on the Great Water Alliance website. With that, I'm going to move forward to the introduction. We'll go through the agenda for tonight's meeting. There's going to be an overview of the Great Water Alliance, or we'll do introductions real quickly first. There's going to be an overview of the Great Water Alliance program and what we're doing. We'll talk about the booster pumping station information and the ongoing communication. And then, like I said, we'll get into the question and answer session for tonight's meeting. As I said before, my name is Dan Dukniak. I'm the general manager of the Waukesha Water Utility. Katie Richardson is also on the line. She is the program manager for Greeley and Hansen, who is the consultant that is leading the design in the program. And also on the line, or we may or may not have, the mayor, Sean Riley, may or may not be in attendance. We have alderpersons Molson and Cummings. Just to give you an understanding of their districts, Alderperson Molson would be representing the district that is north of Broadway, and Alderperson Cummings would be representing the district that is south on Broadway. So just wanted to make sure that you're aware of who your alder people are, and I believe they are on the line. Also, we have Kelly Zalstra. She is the operations manager at the Waukesha Water Utility. She'll be able to answer any operational questions that we have. She's in charge of the design of the booster station and reservoirs and the water tower that's going to be placed on the site, or that is potentially going to be placed on the site. And she understands all the operations and what's going to happen there. So she'll be able to answer those questions for you. So let's go over a great overview of the Great Water Alliance. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page when we're looking at the program and where we are and how we got to where we are today. So the Great Water Alliance, as many of you know, there is a health risk in the city of Waukesha. The water that comes out of our deep wells are 3 times the limit that are set by the EPA. And we are under a court order to comply with the radium standards. So we have to comply by September 1st of 2023. There is also a sustainability issue. The recharge of the current aquifer is limited by a thick shale layer, or a thick layer of rock that's about 200 to 300 feet below the surface, that prevents water from naturally percolating through the ground and recharging the deep aquifer. So it's down more than 350 feet. which is not sustainable for the long time. And that's due to numerous users throughout the entire southeast region of Wisconsin, numerous communities that are utilizing that water. So the other thing is that alternate water supplies that we looked at, the location is near environmentally sensitive areas. So the shallow aquifers south of Waukesha would have a significant impact on an adverse environmental impact on the wetlands and streams, significantly more impact than what we would have with the Great Lakes alternatives. Reverse osmosis would be a potential for treating radium and any other contaminants that would come out of the deep aquifer. However, that would waste about 20% of the water, therefore increasing the demands on the aquifer and adding to that drawdown. Finally, conservation alone will not resolve this issue. So that's where we are. And as we move forward through the Clean Water or through the Great Water Alliance program, there were some milestones that we looked at. And the first thing that we looked at, or in phase one, there were 14 different water supply alternatives that were analyzed. And this started back in 2008. In 2010, we submitted our original application for Great Lakes water to the DNR. And at the same time, Sewer PAC completed a regional water supply plan where 32 experts from the area all unanimously recommended that Waukesha apply for Great Lakes water. In 2013, we had to reformat, after 3 years of analysis and review by the DNR, Waukesha submitted a reformatted application to the DNR, and informational meetings were held in the city of Waukesha. They were conducted. In 2015, after 27 additional technical memoranda were submitted to the DNR completed a draft environmental impact statement and technical review and held public meetings with regards to our application. In 2016, the DNR had the final technical review and EIS were issued. Wisconsin then submitted to the regional body that they had what they believed was a permittable application for Great Lakes water. After a 90-day public comment period, where Michigan and Ontario completed a technical review, and Waukesha held more informational meetings, ultimately that led to a June 16th approval, unanimous approval by the 8 Great Lakes states and the 2 Canadian provinces. So we know the what. We know that Waukesha has to obtain, or Waukesha has to develop a new water supply and has to address this radium issue. We also know the when. We know that we are under a court order to bring our water system in compliance by 2023, or we'll have to install expensive additional treatment, and there'll be potentially penalties that will be applied to us. So now we are looking at the how we're going to do this and how we're going to get it done. And that's where we enter into phase 2 of the program, where we're investigating and going through the investigation, design, and permitting. And that happened between 2017 and 2020, where we developed the engineering and designed the new water system. I want to just bring up the New Berlin situation here real quickly, and we'll get into it a little bit more later. But we approached, as we were going through looking at sites for the reservoir, and Katie will talk about this during her presentation, a number of sites were looked at, and ultimately we settled on a site that we looked at with the county in Minooka Park. That was at the corner of Swartz Road and Racine Avenue. So we went through with New Berlin, and we believe that they should have approved our conditional use permit, and we would say that they illegally denied it. And we believe the courts would have agreed with us, which is why New Berlin was willing to settle the case with us for $2 million, and they made a number of other concessions related to construction that will reduce the cost of the project for all the residents. I want to just also say that the reason that we decided, or we looked at a settlement, was because we knew that the court proceedings would take us further than the 2023 deadline, and we would not be able to meet that deadline, therefore subjecting us to either additional treatment costs or additional fines that would be levied against us. So after analysis was completed, we looked at, or after that was completed, we went back to the analysis and we looked at all the sites that we had previously considered and looked at any previous sites that we were looking at that time that may or may not have been available. And that's when the Rempe site came up. The Rempe site at the time that we were looking at it was not available because it was under contract to be developed as a memory care facility. But that facility, that development went under, or they decided not to proceed with it. Therefore, after we did all of our analysis, the Rempe site was selected as the preferred site. The Rempes were approached with the proposal and were very aware of the New Berlin situation, as well as that the facilities being proposed, or as well as the facilities that were being proposed for the site. And they were excited by the opportunity to sell their land to the city with a commitment to developing that land into a park with facilities for the new water supply incorporated into it. And also that land would double the size of the current park and would look at a commitment to getting that park actually developed. So now we're finalizing the investigation and design stage of it, and we're heading into the construction and water supply transition. And with that, I'll turn it over to Katie, where she's going to go over the details on the facilities and the development of the site. So Katie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dan. So as Dan mentioned, phase 2, which began really in late 2016, early 2017, involves the investigation, the design, and the permitting of both the water supply and the return flow systems for this new water supply. As part of that process, we had to do an evaluation of the routes to get the water from the city of Milwaukee to the city of Waukesha, and then back from the clean water plant located in the city of Waukesha to the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan watershed via the Root River at a location in Franklin. So that evaluation was done over the course of 2017 and 2018 to evaluate a number of routes based on various factors, including things like the size of the right-of-way and whether or not there was space for this pipeline to go in, the traffic and the classifications of the different roads, the environmental impacts, including things like wetlands or waterway crossings or environmentally sensitive areas or habitats in particular. And all of those factors go into selecting the route. At the same time, we are trying to identify different locations that could be used for booster pumping stations along the route. And we looked at approximately just under 20 sites for this booster pumping station in detail, going through evaluations that it included some of the same type of criteria with an emphasis on site availability and proximity to the city and the distribution connection, and then also to the utility headquarters and the administrative building in Waukesha as well. So those are two factors that you add on to the route that are critically important for selecting the site. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm going to focus in on the booster pumping station, as that's really the focus of this presentation, and talk about this site. So as I mentioned, we looked at over almost 20 sites for this, approximately 17 for the booster pumping station. So I want to give you an idea. When I use the word booster pumping station, I'm talking about the whole site. So that includes the booster pumping station itself, which is a building that will house the pumps needed to supply the appropriate pressure for the distribution system in Waukesha, and those are located in the basement of the building. It also has some chemical addition facilities. There's 2 chemicals that will be stored on site with appropriate containment, and everything is rated and tanked, and they're very common chemicals. They are used for disinfection by Milwaukee already, and they're there just in case we need to adjust the disinfection to the water before it goes into the distribution system to make sure that it's at an appropriate level. LAS, which is liquid ammonium sulfate, will be stored on site as a common ingredient in fertilizer. And then also sodium hypochlorite will be stored on site, commonly known as bleach. That's the chlorine element to form the chloramines to disinfect the water before it enters the city, and again, keep that disinfection level at the residual we want to keep the water safe. Additionally, there is water reservoirs located at this site. There's 2 of them that are ground storage reservoirs. Those two reservoirs collectively hold 18 million gallons. We have that amount of water on site at this booster pumping station because there is a single pipeline coming to the city of Waukesha from the city of Milwaukee. We want to make sure we have enough water on site at that point of connection with the pumps, able to supply the city with water for 2 full days. If there was an emergency with either the booster pumping station in Milwaukee or something along the pipeline. So we have 2 days worth of storage there at the booster pumping station site so that the wells that are going to be maintained for emergencies could be brought online and tested to ensure that they're providing safe, clean water to the residents and the businesses of Waukesha. There's also another type of water storage at this site, and that's the water tower. The water tower is probably what you are familiar with seeing throughout the city. There's a lot of water towers in Waukesha. There's also a number of the ground storage reservoirs in residential areas, as well as booster pumping stations. Throughout, the water tower is there to help us with maintaining the pressure in the system as well. So again, this is new infrastructure for here, but the way the city of Waukesha is set up currently, there's these booster pumping stations and groundwater reservoirs and water towers distributed throughout the city to maintain the pressure and provide the water needed by the residents and businesses. Where we're locating this site is near the intersection of Broadway and Les Paul Parkway. We want to be there because that's where the best spot, or one of the most preferred spots to enter into the distribution system is located. The new water supply is going from a distributed system with wells throughout the city to all the water coming in one location. And we've done modeling to see what's going to happen to the distribution system pressures when we do that. And the connection point that is ideal for bringing this water into the city is located near the intersection of Broadway and Les Paul. Where we ended up here, as Dan mentioned, we had to go back to the drawing board and look for additional sites when we saw the schedule issue that we were looking at. We didn't think we were going to be able to make the Department of Justice deadline of September 1st of 2023 with going through the court process and being at the mercy of that schedule. So we re-looked at sites that we had looked at previously. We also looked to see if there was any other sites that had become available since our original studies in the early 2017. This also helps, this site has become a really good fit because there's a couple different benefits. It's even closer to the connection point, which reduces the risk of that pipeline in between that emergency storage we talked about, the ground storage reservoirs, and the connection point to the distribution system by having a shorter pipeline. And it's closer to the utilities administrative building, which is where the operators are in between being out at the other facilities, so it makes a shorter round trip for them. Additionally, we get to add park here. As Dan mentioned, the Nike site itself has been earmarked to be a park for a number of years, but we were able to work with the REMPs and the Parks Department and look at a fit that where we could put the water infrastructure here and get a larger area for the parks, actually doubling the size of the park that was going to be planned, and accelerate the schedule by being able to do some work for the park development as part of this project that helps both the water utility and the parks and move that along. Additionally, it's a good move and a good fit because of that $2 million payment Dan said, and the ability to meet the DOJ deadline. If we can't meet that DOJ deadline, we have the chance that we're going to have to put in interim radium treatment, which could be to the cost of about $3.5 million and wouldn't be used after the new source is in. So getting that schedule, meeting that deadline is really critical. I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've studied almost 20 sites looking for a good location for this booster pumping station. And there's been a number of questions of why does this need to be in a residential area? Could it be put somewhere else? Is there somewhere farther away that we could put it? Could it be put at closer to the intersection of Broadway and Les Paul? And I want to address some of those comments right here as we go through this. We did look at the location next to the Broadway Commons on the other side, on the western side. We also looked at a number of other options. But again, the site availability and that proximity to the distribution connection are really critical factors for determining where we put this infrastructure. So when we have the Parks Department and we have the RIMPs interested in working with the team to make that site work, that's a really big bonus when we're trying to figure out where is a feasible location for this. Additionally, we need to be close to the city also, because water infrastructure, to reduce the risk, it's beneficial to have it close to the city. Minooka Park was close and that was going to work pretty well, but this is even better from that perspective. You know, there was pros and cons to both sites. This is nice that it's closer to the edge of the city and closer to that connection point. There was benefits to the other site as well. That's another question that came up, and was, you know, is there one determining factor, or how do you, you know, if there was nothing that was great that was said about the environmental assessment about this site. And I think when you look at the number of sites that we've had, and I know you don't have all of that information, but we have compiled a lot of different factors, including, like we talked about, proximity to the city, proximity to the connection, site availability, environmental impacts, cost has to come into play, schedule comes into play. All those things get factored into each of the sites. So there really isn't one thing that drives you to a certain location. It's a number of things. Again, just to talk a little bit more about that site on the western side of the Broadway Commons, if we move to the next site, next slide, please. One of the things we look at is not disrupting wetlands and waterways, and also looking at the soils that are going to be on a site. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you see a square that has a red swath through it and green, and also some lighter green going through. That's the site that's located near the intersection, or more near the intersection of West Paul and Broadway. What you're looking at is a map of soil types. The red and green and light green are all hydric soils. Hydric soils are soils that are usually conducive to wetlands, and they're also very loamy and marshy, and so they're not very conducive to building infrastructure on, especially water storage tanks, which can apply a high point load. So when we looked at that site, we're seeing that the soils there aren't great. There's also, there's known wetlands out there in the wetlands inventory through the Wisconsin DNR. And then we also have soils that aren't the best for building this type of infrastructure on. You can do it, it just is more usually cost intensive and can be more challenging. The site on the right is the Nike, and then the REMPE site closest to the REMPE parcel closest to the Nike site. You can see on that slide, there's less of these hydric soils, there's less wetlands in the way. So when we're looking and comparing these two, there's a cost benefit and a reduced environmental impact to going to the site that has less of those hydric soils. If we move on to the next slide, even on the 3 REMPE properties and the Nike site, there's even more environmental considerations. So when we're doing our site evaluations, we have a number of sites, we get down to a few, then we get down to the actual site itself, and we do a number of layouts on the site itself to see where we can do the least amount of environmental impact and the least amount of earthwork, and really try and be mindful of the cost that's going to have to go in. We want to not disrupt contaminated soils, we want to not disrupt environmentally sensitive areas, and we want to stay away from any existing buildings as much as we can. So that's why we looked at a number of different layouts. On the screen, what you're seeing is, and it's a little bit hard to see, I'll try and use my cursor. On the far right is kind of a Z-shaped or a backwards 4-shaped parcel. That's the far east REMPE parcel. There's a square that has some teal markings and some light blue markings in the center. That's the REMPE parcel that's adjacent to the Nike site. And then there's the Nike site is to the left of that. These big black squares are different areas where we have done some investigations further after narrowing into these 2 parcels. for the water infrastructure, as there's more wetlands on the eastern Rempe parcel, and there's also an existing ATC overhead line easement with high voltage power lines going through there, and those power lines are power lines in general are usually approximately between 80 and 200 feet. So you've probably noticed those overhead power lines as well, and an easement we couldn't build on. So then what we do is, again, we look for, there's some environmentally sensitive areas in that lighter green, and there's also wetlands existing here. I've also shaded out the area A. Area A is where the Nike missile site, where that was located, and where the actual structures themselves were located. That is a closed and remediated site. So I think there was a number of questions too about the contamination that could be possible on the Nike missile site. It was contaminated. It has been closed and remediated, but because of that, that's appropriate. You can add some soil, which we're going to do to make it so that we can have the park infrastructure up there. But building into the ground with our reservoirs that we need and the booster pumping station with the pumps in the basement and the pipes that are going through, we do not want to disturb that closed and remediated area. We want to try and avoid doing the type of construction we need for the infrastructure on that part of the site. So when you look at trying to get 10 contiguous acres and staying away from these environmental considerations, if we move to the next slide, you can see that that pushes us down into the corner of the site that the site layer I think that you may have seen on the website, or you can go look at afterwards. I'm going to show it on the next slide too, but we'll stay here for now. And we find this location that will work for the infrastructure. This is the final grading. So one thing I haven't talked about yet is topography. Topography and the rolling hills that are on the site also have a big impact on the amount of earthwork that's needed for building this type of infrastructure. Here, we're going to be able to use the hill. You can see the contours if you're familiar with contour maps, or even if you're not, I'll explain. The closer the lines are together, and you can see some light gray above the reservoirs and then also near the road, that's the steeper the incline. So if there's a lot of the lines close together, that's a steep incline. What we're going to be able to do by putting the infrastructure closer to the road, which there was also a number of questions of why does it need to be here, and hopefully I'm answering your questions. But if we get pushed down to that corner because some of the environmental impacts and the environmental considerations, and then we use the topography, pushes us down into the flattest part we can find. We are going to be removing we're going to be doing earthwork and putting in retaining walls behind the reservoir so that we can get the reservoirs to fit a little bit farther back from the road. And then also with doing that earthwork, that hill behind should hide the reservoirs if you are up using the park, and then they'll kind of partially be obscured from the north by the hill. If we go to the next slide.
Katie, real quick, if I can interrupt,
Yeah. Sure.
While we're on this slide, I just wanted to point out that the entrance to the park, where you can see East Broadway is listed, that is going to be shifted so that it is right across from Rempe Drive. So we're going to be answering a question later, but this is kind of a visual where you can see how that is, the entrance is going to be shifted, and it'll be right across from Rempe Drive. So that could potentially be a controlled intersection. So go ahead, Katie.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, then one other point while you have that, very good, Dan. There's the entrance is going to go, and there'll be a split off so that the utility workers that need to get to the site will be able to pull off that way. But traffic into the park should not be stopped because there'll be room to park their trucks or cars before the gate to enter the site, and you'll be able to get through to the park. So we go into the next slide. This you can give a better visual of how much more park we're going to be able to get. So on the left-hand side, there's the blue and green Nike property. That was originally going to be the park. You can see the top of the hill that the cursor is moving. That's where the old missile infrastructure was. With the working with the Parks Department and the Rempe family, we're able to double the park, and it's going to be actually deed restricted to be park. So there is this actually is a way that we can help protect this parkland area because of these deed restrictions and the work we've done with the EPA and actually National Park Services and the General Services Administration to get the rest of the Rempe property deed restricted to be park. This will protect it from becoming apartments, or it could become industrial area. This would protect that. So the rest of the green would be deed restricted in that way. Also, I just want to point out too that there is going to be the ability to put in, we're working with the Parks Department on different things that could be different amenities, we'll say, instead of things that could be a part of the park. And they'll be going through a master plan process of that. So there'll be an opportunity for the public to provide feedback. Some of the ideas they've talked about is things like a dog park or disc golf courses, a number of trails, especially since this is rolling hills through here. So nice hiking trails that you can go through. And that'll be all protected as part of this park. So we can go on to the next slide. This is the preliminary booster pumping station rendering. And this is from driving, or this is one of the preliminary booster pumping renderings. We have heard your feedback from through both the PSD process and the questions coming in before this open house. This was a preliminary rendering to try and give just a sense of what the site was going to look like. It doesn't have all the existing trees, that's fair. And it doesn't even have all the trees that we're going to end up planting. We're going through this process to get feedback on what you'd like to see. And we've heard a lot about how we need to increase the number of trees and increase the screening to the best we can. Another thing I want to mention on this booster pumping station is that we are showing these with the trees as at their height that they would be, they're kind of mid-mature. There was a question about why we didn't have the mature trees like we had in New Berlin, and there was a comment when we were going through that process and a concern that we were showing the trees too far along, because it is going to take some time for these trees to mature. We're going to be planting them at about 8 to 10 feet in height so that they are viable and can grow. Any taller than that, more mature than that, they tend not to be viable. So, but we will be able to gather your thoughts on that too as we move through the Plan Commission process, but we have heard the comments and we'll be adding more trees, and then we'll be doing final renderings for the Plan Commission process that'll have more of that addressed. It'll also have more of the background here. You can see the hill of the park, but you don't, and a little bit of the trees, but you don't see all the trees that would be up close. So those are some details that we'll add as we get farther into the process. And I've mentioned the Plan Commission process a few times. I'll talk a little bit more about that timeline when we get closer to the end here. We go to the next slide. There's also been a number of questions on, what would this look like in a residential area? As I mentioned previously, Waukesha does have ground storage reservoirs and booster pumping stations and water towers throughout the city. So we wanted to just show you an example of one that will look like this water tower. This water tower is a little bit shorter than the one that would be at the Nike site, but this is the style. So it will have the concrete base and the steel top. It's called the composite style. This water tower is near UW Waukesha, near the Tallgrass neighborhood, if you're familiar with that area. This is an up close shot, all the way on the left is the up close shot. Again, our stem, the concrete part will be taller. The street view is, which is the next one, the photo in the middle, is similar to what you might see with the hill driving east on Broadway. As you get to that little bit of a berm that's in between the apartments and the Nike site. Again, the tower's a little bit taller, so it might be a little bit higher up, but this is a close approximation of something that exists out there. And then on the right-hand side, we have a view of the water tower from the neighborhood. That's again from the Tallgrass neighborhood, if you're curious. As I mentioned, there's also ground storage reservoirs throughout the city of Waukesha and also all over the country. It's a fairly common practice because water infrastructure, we like to put it close to the city if we can, because that is where the water needs to be used. And in particular with these two ground storage reservoirs, a benefit to this Nike site over the Minnesota Park site is their proximity to the city and having that emergency storage close to the distribution system. So all four of these, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see behind the trees all the way on the left, there's the reservoir there. A couple of, then you can go to the right. All of these reservoirs are, similar in style to what we will have at this site. And we just want to give you a sense of what they can look like in neighborhoods. If we move on to the next slide, there was a couple other questions that came up either in the PSC comments or that came up in the questions ahead of time. And again, we appreciate you sending those along early. One of the questions that has come up is about the lighting. So with the main supply to the water, to the city for water, with a lot of the emergency storage and the main booster pumping station in one location, we really don't want to draw attention to this location. Obviously, if you're from the area, you'll know it's there, but we do try and minimize the light that's on site. We want to just use what's required for security. It's downward pointing over the doors. Also, the utility is sensitive to energy usage, so we're using high efficiency LEDs that are focused so that we don't have the light pollution into the area and that we are being energy efficient. Another concern is about the noise level. So as I mentioned, the booster pumps at the booster pumping station are going to be located in the basement of the booster pumping station. So they'll be underground in a concrete building. It will be very hard, not unlikely, to hear those pumps running while they're going. The decibel count is undetectable. It's in the 35 decibel range outside the concrete building at the fence line. So that's going to be very difficult to hear. There will be some noise though from the generator running. The generator is located outside of the booster pumping station building. It does have noise canceling or sound attenuation enclosure around it, but when it is running, if there was an emergency, you would be able to hear it. On a regular basis, you'll hear it being tested for about 30 minutes once a week, and it's going to sound, if you were standing at the fence, like someone is running a vacuum cleaner. It's about that loud, 70 decibels at the fence line. So if you were walking in on the other side of the street or in the park area, it might sound like somebody's running a vacuum cleaner. As we talked a little bit about the landscaping, I'll just reiterate, we are going to be relooking at our landscaping plans and seeing how many more trees we can fit in. We're also going to be trying to preserve as many trees as is possible that exist out there. And then one final concern I want to just make sure we address before we get to the questions was about the home values. There's been a number of comments and questions about home values. There was a study performed by a third party outside of the program that was done to address this concern for the New Berlin residents as well, but it is applicable to this site. It wasn't site specific, but it discussed the studies that have been done to show that water infrastructure of this nature going in to residential neighborhoods does not impact. It concludes that those home values are not impacted. And we have that report if you are interested in it. We go on to the next slide. Again, we really appreciate everyone coming out today and signing up for the open house and participating and sending questions ahead of time. We would like to keep communications ongoing. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the exciting news we've had and then wrap up with how you can get a hold of us. And then I'll turn it over to Dan and we can get into some of the questions that were submitted that haven't been addressed by the presentation already. So go on to the next slide. One of the things that you will find on the website, or if you want to sign up for the newsletter, is announcements of current events. One that's recently happened that we're very excited about is the EPA announcing that we were going to get a Water Infrastructure Funding Innovation Act loan. These loans are very competitive and it takes approximately 2 years to go through the process with the EPA. It includes environmental assessments, design assessments, and then also financial health of the utility and the city's investigations before you can get one of these loans. And with the interest rate that the water utility, along with the city of Waukesha, have worked on this application to get, we're going to be able to save the ratepayers over $1 million a year. I mentioned that because there was a question about whether or not EPA had been involved. We have worked with a number of federal organizations, and they have seen the environmental assessments that were performed by our team. There was another question about why a more rigorous and more thorough environmental study isn't being pushed forward based on the PSC letter. And I do want to address that as well. Some of this is semantics with the processes that have gone, that each of the different regulatory agencies go through. So we have performed environmental assessments for this site thoroughly, and that information has been shared with various departments in DNR, including wetlands and waterways and contaminated soils. It's been shared with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They didn't feel like they had jurisdiction because we didn't have impacts to jurisdictional wetlands under the Army Corps. It's been shared with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and then also, again, with EPA to get their buy-in to the assessments that have been done and those conclusions. I'm going to move on to the next slide. There's a number of other activities that are coming up. So the city owns the Nike site and then the 2 Rempe parcels at this time. Because of the size of the program, there's a lot of work, obviously, that we've talked a little bit about that's going to be going on both in the city of Waukesha and then in the neighboring communities. And we need a location for the construction management team to have a trailer. And so that is going to go onto the Nike Rempe site. And it will be, you'll probably see that in the next few weeks. You'll see a placement of a trailer. It's not going to be a lot of traffic. It'll be a trailer. It looks like probably a few mobile homes together. It'll be a little bit larger than a single mobile home. And there'll be meetings there on occasion. We won't see construction activity there until we get the permitting review and the plan commission approval for this site, but you will see a little bit of activity coming up here. With that, we're also going to see some activity with the return flow pipeline construction is going to be starting up. And you can get more information about that on the website. There'll be an interactive map showing where the crews are going to be started that you can check in on every once in a while to see where the status is of that. Similarly, all of the return flow construction packages have been awarded, and all of that construction will be beginning this fall. On the water supply side, the water supply pipeline from the city of Milwaukee to the corner of Schwartz and Coffee in New Berlin will be awarded in September by the Waukesha Common Council. And so following that, after submittals and reviews and some of the construction mobilization process, we'll start to see some construction for that pipeline east of Schwartz and Coffee as well. And that again will be up on the website. For this particular site and the pipeline associated with this site, we still have the plan commission process that is coming up, where there'll be opportunities to provide feedback. And we'll be working towards getting an approval of the City of Waukesha Plan Commission. And then we also have the DNR's final review of our construction permits. So they'll look at the final design, and that'll be going on as well for the booster pumping station and all the storage facilities and some of the pipeline associated with this. And updates for that will be on the website as well. If you go to the next slide, some of the places you can get information about all these things that I am mentioning is you can always call the hotline and give us a call. We'll give you a call back. You can leave a message and we'll get back to you. You can sign up for our newsletter. The newsletter comes out and has articles about the progress and what's going on with the program and has information for you as well. We also, on the website, there's a couple of different places. One of the main ones is a frequently asked questions. We try and update those periodically with, if we're getting a lot of the same comments coming into the hotline or through the email, we update those and add questions so you can find the information there. Also, there's an in your area Waukesha button that has information that's updated periodically as well with specific Waukesha resident information. We also have social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. There's some informational and educational videos up on YouTube. There's through social media, through Facebook and Twitter, we'll post a lot of links back to the website if something is updated, or articles that are going on, reminders to check out the website if something has changed. Additionally, we'll have the postcards if we're going to be having an open house event, or if we're going to be in your area, we would be sending those postcards. And then again, we have open houses like this for, during this COVID time, or we'll be moving to in-person ones as is safe to do so, or doing more virtual around the construction as that gets up and going, and we have schedules for that as well. Okay. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Dan, and we can go through some of the previously submitted questions that we haven't got to yet, and then we'll also we'll go through some of the questions that were submitted via chat as well.
Okay, thanks, Katie. And I'm going to ask Lynn to keep the presentation up just in case we have to go back to some of the slides. We can do that. I wanted to just hit on a couple points that Katie was making to make sure that we clarify a few things. Once again, I just want to say the pumps at the pump station will only be run once a week. Or I mean, and not that the pumps, the generator at the reservoirs and pump station will only be run once a week for about 30 minutes. And it sounds like a vacuum cleaner at the property line. As you move further away from the property line, or you go across the street, you will also, you will see it. Sorry, I'm getting a chat here. As you go across the line, you will also see, or across the street, you'll also see that will be reduced, that will get lower and lower, to the point where the cars will probably make more noise than you'll hear from the generator themselves, the cars on Broadway. The other thing is at the full moon with the lighting, want to make sure that that's at the site, not at the neighboring properties. So there won't be a difference 500 feet away, which is where most of the properties are. So there won't be, it's not like this is lit up and you'll see a big glow in the sky. It's just lights that are around the facilities, like Katie said, just for safety reasons. And at 500 feet away, those will not be visible. So I wanted to make sure that I cleared that up. Again, I want to just thank you for submitting your questions ahead of time. I'm going to run through the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then we have a few that were submitted also via the chat and through email. So I want to make sure that we're getting everybody's. First question that we had was, how will walkable access to the new missile park be provided for residents in the neighborhoods surrounding the site? And I just want to answer this by saying final plans are still being discussed with parks. They're developing, as Katie mentioned, a master plan for the park. We can share that feedback with them that a sidewalk next to the road would be desirable. And as we were looking at this further, when this question came up, we are moving the driveway, as I pointed out, but we also noticed that there's sidewalks on the other side of the street, so we could easily put in a crosswalk to line up with the park access and make sure that the paths down to the road paths that are in the park come down to the road so that you could access them right from the road, walking from the neighborhoods. So that's a good point. We'll make the Parks Department aware of it, and we'll see if we can get that addressed. The next question was, why wasn't another location within Minooka Park, west of Coffee Road, across from Oak Park Road, on the south side of Racine considered? The water pipeline would not need to be extended to the Rempe Nike site, which would save millions in cost. So please explain why this alternative was not considered. First off, I want to point out that the water main that's extended to Rempe Park is actually approximately the same distance as it was, or even shorter as it was going to the Minooka Park site. If you look at a map, we were coming up Coffee Road, and then heading south on Swartz to Racine Avenue, then to come back north on Racine Avenue. So that water main is going away. We'll head straight on Coffee, and with that diversion of the pipeline going south on Swartz and coming back up Racine, that is about the same distance as it is to get to Rempe Park. So I want to make sure that people are aware. Actually, the distance to the Rempe site is actually I believe it's shorter, and Katie could correct me if I'm wrong on that. But alternatives were looked at within Minooka Park with Waukesha County. One of the locations that was looked at was under 7 acres, and it was too small to accommodate the facilities. And the second location in the park that was evaluated was large enough. However, it has facilities that are frequently used, that house frequently used amenities in the park, and the county park department felt that removing those would be detrimental to the park users throughout the county. So that location was not made available to us by the park. And I want to make sure that people understand, we did thoroughly look at all of Minooka Park and all of what was made up, the areas that made up of Minooka Park, and to see if we could accommodate, the county could work with us and accommodate us. Again, Minooka Park is a large park. It's located within the city of Waukesha, the town of Waukesha, and the city of New Berlin. The land that the county chose for us to be on was at that corner of Swartz and Racine, which is why we ended up at the New Berlin Plan Commission for that conditional use permit. How wide are the reservoirs, and why is there only, oh, I'm sorry, we talked, Katie hit on that.
I missed that, Dan. So I'll just say
Okay.
that the ground storage reservoirs are 180.5 feet, about 181 feet wide. And then there was also a question that I meant to address too about the height. Though the water tower and everything is still being finalized, the water tower itself is going to be approximately 160 feet tall. The booster pumping station building is about 34 feet tall from grade, and then the reservoirs are approximately 65 feet from grade. That varies a little bit, again, because of the hill and some of the topography. So there is a little bit of a difference in the front to the back, and actually either side to side too on the reservoirs as well.
I'm gonna address real quickly also one of the questions that was submitted via email. Aren't there more reservoirs that would have been required at Minooka Park site? No, there are not. The reservoirs that are being proposed for the Rempe site are the same size, not dimensionally, but they're both 8.6 million gallons, and that's what they were at Minooka Park. So that we are not adding additional reservoirs here at this site. And with regards to dangerous chemicals being across from homes, they are not dangerous chemicals. The sodium hypochlorite is actually liquid bleach. It's a stronger liquid bleach. And the chemicals that we are suggesting at this site are actually held at, or chemicals similar to it are held at our booster stations right now that are in neighborhoods that are across the street from schools. So they are safe, and if there was a compromise of the chemical, and they're constructed with containment areas, so all of the chemicals would be held in a containment area, and there would be no contamination as a result. But again, we hold chemicals. The sodium hypochlorite is held throughout the city at a number of different sites, and we use a different chemical for corrosion control right now that is similar to what we'll be using when Milwaukee comes online, but both of those chemicals are stored regularly at sites throughout the city in residential areas across from schools. So there is no harm, there's no concern related to those. So now the next question is, do the Rempe trustees know that the land they gifted the city for a park is now going to be situated behind these monstrosities? And as a water person, I would not call them monstrosities. We do try to blend in with the neighborhoods, but the Rempes were very aware, and they were very encouraged by the doubling of the park and the commitment to federally protecting that land, rather than it being developed into apartments, workman housing, or an extension of the industrial park that is in this area, because all of those could have been those could have been potential developments for this area. And to think that that would not have been developed in the future, I don't believe that would have been the case. As we saw, there was the memory care facility that was proposed there, and I'm sure they would have been developed at some point. However, with with us purchasing the property and us utilizing the Nike missile site and a small portion of the Nike or of the Rempe site, we are able to make sure that there's a commitment to a large park that will be developed in this area. There was a question as to when will the park be developed. It is going to be developed with our construction. So not fully developed, it'll be developed in phases, but with our construction, the road will be installed up to the top of the hill where there will potentially be, I'm thinking there's a shelter up there, some and with bathrooms and a parking lot and that sort of thing. And I haven't seen the final master plan, but again, it'll be developed in phases and that'll be up to the Common Council. But there was a commitment by the Common Council to start that development immediately with our construction. Knowing the construction is going to take from 2020 to 2023, I wouldn't anticipate the park opening until 2022, 2023 area, or for some improvements to be done until that time. So that's about the time frame that you're looking at. The next question, how are the City of Waukesha and the Great Water Alliance providing leadership on green sustainable infrastructure by collaborating with and incorporating local neighborhood stakeholders? And I think about this more globally. Again, we're reducing impact to the aquifers and the wetlands and waterways. They are negatively impacting. We're reducing the unintentional mining of Great Lakes water in the groundwater. And we're bringing in water from Great Lakes and returning it to the Great Lakes, resulting in no net loss to the Great Lakes, and recycling and reusing that water, which is completely green. And we are working with all the neighborhood communities on this regional solution. So we are working with not only Milwaukee and supplying us the water, but going through Milwaukee, through New Berlin, into Waukesha, and returning it back through New Berlin, through Muskego, through the city of Franklin, discharging into a river that goes through Oak Creek, through Caledonia, and through the city of Racine. And we have worked with all of those communities, addressing all of their concerns on, impacts to the discharge to the river, and shown them that it's going to be a benefit to the river. And so this is, if there is ever an example of a green, sustainable project and infrastructure, this is the prime example of that. The next is, what sources of renewable energy will be used to power the station? We are not using renewable energy, but we are using energy and water efficient fixtures throughout, or efficient energy and water fixtures throughout. We're also investigating potentially recapturing energy from the return flow pipeline and utilizing the highly treated effluent for non-potable uses. So there is a lot of renewable investigation that's going on with this project. Will there be a carbon offset for the environmental impact of clearing 12 acres of forest land to place the BPS, the booster pump station, the ground storage reservoir at the site? No, there's no offset for the 12 acres. However, we are putting a deed restriction and committing to federally protecting 35 new acres of parkland, rather than, like I said, potentially for apartments or workmen's housing or potential expansion of the industrial park, as this is adjacent to an industrial park, and it could have been used to expand that. So we are taking that land forever out of the potential of being developed and guaranteeing that it will be parked land for the long term. And we are committing, and we are putting a deed restriction on the property that will commit to that. What are the flooding risks to the Springbrook neighborhood when the additional 1,460 feet of pipeline is laid around the neighborhood? What are the flood risks when pipelines break? The potential of flooding risks is low. This is infrastructure serving the entire city, therefore it will be monitored similar to the rest of the distribution system. Unless there's underground parking immediately adjacent to where a break would happen, there would be very little risk of flooding. As we have, and I don't know if Kelly is aware, I'm certainly not aware of any time that a water main break has caused flooding in the city of Waukesha. So I don't believe that there is any flooding risk. On communication, why were residents not given a chance to voice our concern with this site prior to the city voting on this? So the Rempe site and the purchase of it was made public in March. And when we were going through this whole thing in New Berlin, and the residents were made aware that this was a possibility in March. If you remember, December is when the New Berlin Plan Commission denied our conditional use permit. In January, at the end of January is when the lawsuit was entered into or filed against the city of New Berlin. We had these discussions in February, and again, we reacted and went back and looked at everything. And as soon as we knew that this was the preferred site, the council acted to purchase the site, and we made it public. We made it public at that point. So it happened almost immediately after we knew about it. Is Rempe going to become a parking lot for the workers' vehicles? No, it is not. There will be construction parking there, but it will be limited to the area that was identified on the construction plan. If this project moves forward, how will proof be provided that all recommendations proposed were carried out? Again, as Katie mentioned, this would have to go through the Plan Commission for approval. And those of the suggestions and issues that are raised here would become conditions of that approval, meaning that when we develop this site, we would have to meet those conditions of the Plan Commission. So that's how there would be proof that the recommendations would be carried out. Who within the Waukesha leadership made such a decision? This was actually a unanimous decision made by the Water Utility Commission and the Common Council. The Common Council, I can tell you, was excited about the opportunity to add parkland in this area and to develop the park in this area. They believe, and the Water Utility Commission believes, that this partnership with the Rempes is actually a win-win for everyone. Yes, there are going to be reservoirs and a tower in this neighborhood. There are reservoirs and towers throughout the city in neighborhoods, as Katie mentioned. And the fact of the matter is that there is going to be a park that is going to be added to and developed in this area. There is who is financially benefiting from this decision? The answer to that is simple. All of the ratepayers of the Waukesha Water Utility benefit from this decision because it is the most economical solution and provides for ongoing reduced operational cost with its proximity to the utility. So the winners for everything financially are actually the ratepayers of the Waukesha Water Utility, which include all of you. Why were the residents not involved? They are involved right now. They were, again, we made this public in March. And when we had everything out there and available with the PSC, we made sure that everybody was notified, and we worked with them to make sure all of the people in the neighborhood south and the apartments were also notified. Katie did answer this. Has the EPA been involved as it is being developed on a nuclear missile site? Most assuredly with toxic waste. And why did Waukesha leadership not insist on a complete environmental study? The EPA has been involved and reviewed this site through an environmental assessment process. And we did do an environmental study on this site, as Katie has outlined and as Katie outlined in her presentation. The EPA was actually did all of this, and they looked at the cleanup of the site and the waste that was cleaned up at this site and the reclamation of the site, and they liked this project so much that they awarded the city a loan with an interest rate of 1.16% and a payment schedule that benefits all of the ratepayers due to the benefits to the project it provides. This is also reviewed by the DNR, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the PSC, and all through the environmental assessment process, and that was performed by the design team, and they all concur with the results that were provided. Are we going to have to file a lawsuit or get the EPA involved in order to have this project moved to a more appropriate site? Again, a lawsuit is certainly an option that you have, and a lawsuit could be filed. But part of the reason that New Berlin settled and agreed to a $2 million payment is because they were unlikely to win. However, we didn't have the time to wait for the court process to continue through that process. Again, it could go through that process. There could be a lawsuit filed, and we deal with that at that point. But I'll just reiterate that in order to get this off, a $2 million payment was made, and other concessions were made with the construction, which is why when the construction bids came in for this project, it was $7.5 million below the budget number. We do have, and then I'm going to turn it over to Katie for a few other questions, and then we have a few that were submitted. So Katie?
Okay. There was a question that came in asking if the original plan was to put the cylinder by 164th and Cleveland. I assume that means ground storage reservoirs, and no, we're not aware of a plan to put any of the storage near 164th and Cleveland. Another question that came in about what other options are there away from a subdivision, and I hope that I kind of explained this process thoroughly, but again, as we went through this process, we need the infrastructure to be as close to that distribution system connection as possible. And so when we're looking in that area, as you're aware, there's a lot of development around the city of Waukesha, and in particular near Les Paul and Broadway. And so we look for open areas where we can have 10 acres that is close to that as we can. Another question is about the Institute for Sustainability Infrastructure, ISI Envision scorecard ratings. I'm going to answer this briefly. If you want follow-up on this question, I can give you a call back. For those of you familiar with the Institute of Sustainability's Infrastructure Envision scorecard, it's a rating that can, similar to LEED, or if you've heard of Green Cities, things like that. And it's a way to award infrastructure projects for their sustainable choices. We did use Envision guidance and in our development of key performance indexes, or those criteria that I was mentioning, such as environmental impacts and site availability, operational impacts, energy efficiency, things like that were built in, but we have not moved forward with preparing a full scorecard and going for that award. So at this time, we just have that we use the structure, so we don't actually have a score. There was another question about the vibration that will be on site. When the booster pumping station is up and operational, there will not be any vibration. During the construction, as we do have to do some earthwork, there may be some noise with that earthwork as they are digging out for the basement of the booster pumping station and the reservoirs. It should be fairly minimal, but there will be some noise from the construction and maybe some vibration potentially from that. There was another question about whether or not anything else could be developed in the northern part of the Nike parcel. For the Rempe, 2 Rempe parcels, other items could be developed for the northern part of the Nike parcel where there is that closed and remediated site. It would be difficult to develop anything beyond a park or something that doesn't need to go put in basement or foundations of any size because of that it's capped with soil, and you don't want to disturb that soil. So it would be difficult to develop that northern part of the Nike site. It's into something that needs either a large foundation or a basement. There seems to be a lot of questions coming in about where information was posted and how this was announced in March, and that was all done through the Great Water Alliance in your area booster pumping station. It was done through social media. It was also posted in the Great Water Alliance newsletter. So again, we really recommend if you're into social media, following us on social media, or getting signed up for that e-newsletter so that you can just get the information directly emailed to you. The answer. There's also another question about the cranes and the equipment. There will be some tall cranes on the site to put the reservoirs into place. They will all go onto the property, and they are able to get underneath the existing overhead lines that are there, but there will be some cranes that will be visible during the construction process. Dan, did you have any other questions?
I'm looking at the, so I think I'm looking at the chat, and it asks about timing of construction of the booster pump station and reservoirs and when it will start.
Sure.
The plan right now is to bid that out in January of next year. So I would anticipate construction starting probably in May timeframe, May or June, for this area. One thing about the cranes, also the cranes that come out are there for a short time. They're not there for a long time, for the entire time. There's an article about Worcester, Ohio, and installing a water tower, and mentions a third of the property is being sold and decreases since the installation of the tower. And the article that I found on there is deals with an older tower, if I'm wrong with that, and it's directly in the neighborhood, or built within the neighborhood. This one is not going to be right in your subdivision. It's going to be across the street in a park, which is typical for some of these. We do have in Waukesha, we do have water towers that are in residential neighborhoods, and there's nothing, as the MSA study showed, there's nothing that shows that these negatively impact values. And we can get you a copy of that study if you want. What guarantee do we have that there will be no construction done at night and that would cause vibrations? And we can write that into the spec. I don't know. Did you answer that one already, Katie?
I didn't, Dan, but it is actually already in the spec. Night work is not allowed unless we get express permission from the city. The work hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. unless there's a very specific reason we would need to do it for a short time frame. It would not be extended. But right now we do not plan on allowing any night work in this area.
And I can tell you that alderpersons Molson and Cummings would frown upon our request to do night work that had vibration, and that would negatively impact the neighborhood. So unless it is required, absolutely required, I don't believe that would be allowed. How tall is UW Waukesha Tower shown in the presentation compared to the planned tower? I don't know. I can get that answer to you. Kelly, Kelly's on the call. I don't know if you can unmute yourself and answer that. I hate to put you on the spot, but if you can, otherwise, I don't have an answer for that.
I can tell you what the overflow elevation is, but that doesn't tell me what the ground elevation is. So I would prefer that we provide that information at a later date so that it's accurate.
Okay, thank you. So we will get that information to you, and we'll post that on the site or get that information to you. Ryan, you're the one that posted that question, so we'll try to get that answer out to you. That is all the questions that I see. I do not believe that Callie, who's monitoring the email, Callie, was anything else submitted via email?
I think that was everything.
All right, thank you. Again, I would just reiterate, we appreciate everybody's time and effort that you put into coming out to our meeting tonight. It is important that we get a chance to talk to you, and I wish it could have been in person. I actually really do. I'm going to start my video again, and Lynn, you can turn the presentation off.
Before Lynn, before you turn it off, can you leave it up for just a second, Dan, so we can show the social media, the website, and the email, all that contact information? Oh, might be too late.
Nope.
So you got it back up?
I don't see that she has it back up.
Okay, so on the website, which is greatwateralliance.com, you can find the icons to follow us on social media. The hotline is 1-262-409-4444. Through the website too, greatwateralliance.com, you can email us or the social media. Again, or the hotline is 1-262-409-4444.
And again, this video will be posted online on the site, and people can use the site and hotline as Katie mentioned for questions. So we want to make sure that you are aware of that. Here it is. She's sharing her screen again, and again, there's the information that's up there. Feel free, any of the social media sites, the website, or giving us a call. You can also give me a call at the utility. I'd be more than happy to talk to any of you about this project and the concerns that you have, and walk you and address your concerns and walk you through some of the answers that you have, or that we have for you. So with that, I'm going to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I appreciate you taking the time and listening to us. Adam and Courtney, thank you again have a good evening, and I wish everyone else a good evening, and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.